The first time Dr. Elias Morgan saw her, she looked like she was sleeping. Not the kind of sleep that ends with a yawn and a stretch, but the heavy, heartbreaking kind that draped years over a person's soul. Her name was Eleanor Grace Hartley, heiress to a real estate empire, known for her bold philanthropy and dazzling presence in Manhattan's elite circles, until a sudden car crash left her in a coma, tucked away in a sterile room on the 12th floor of St. Jude's Neurological Center. Doctors came and went. Therapies were tried and abandoned. Years passed. Most believed she'd never return. But Elias couldn't stop caring. He was only 27 when he first got assigned to her case, a quiet, humble resident with too much heart and not enough experience. He wasn't supposed to get emotionally attached, but something about her loneliness spoke to his own. He'd lost his mother to a stroke when he was 15. She had been in a coma for 4 months before passing away, alone, silent, unseen. Elias had never forgiven himself for not visiting more often, so he visited Eleanor every single day. He read her novels, played her favorite music. He'd gone through her husband's public interviews to find her favorite jazz playlist, brushed her hair, and even talked to her like she could hear him. Nurses began calling her Sleeping Beauty and joked about Elias being her prince. But for Elias, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was responsibility, and maybe a strange kind of hope. No one ever visited her, not her so-called friends, not her husband, a man with a name built from dollar signs and polished smiles. Gregory Hartley, CEO of Hartley and Dominion, once appeared on Forbes cover beside Eleanor, but after her accident, he vanished from her bedside, citing grief and healing. Rumors said he'd moved to Europe with a younger socialite. Still, Elias stayed. And then, one cold November morning, after 5 years of silence, Eleanor blinked. At first, Elias thought he imagined it, but then she moved her fingers. Slowly, clumsily, but undeniably alive. Alarms were called. Neurologists rushed in. It made headlines across the country. Sleeping heiress wakes after 5 years. Elias was there through every step. At first, Eleanor couldn't speak. Her muscles had atrophied. She wept when she finally heard her own voice, a broken whisper that called out, "Is this real?" "Yes," Elias had said, his voice cracking. "You're here. You came back." As the weeks passed and therapy resumed, Eleanor slowly stitched herself back together. But she wasn't the same woman she'd been before. The glamorous photos online didn't reflect the soul she'd become, softer, quieter, and endlessly curious about the people who had stayed. Especially Elias. "Why you?" she asked him one afternoon, her eyes watery. "Why didn't you give up?" Elias hesitated. "Because someone gave up on my mom. I promised myself I'd never let that happen to someone else. And I believed in you." Eleanor's heart clenched. No one had believed in her like that, not in years, not even Gregory. Then one day, months into her recovery, Gregory finally returned. His black Rolls-Royce pulled into the hospital private driveway. A photographer just happened to be there. Eleanor sat in a wheelchair by the window, watching as her husband adjusted his cufflinks and plastered on his perfect smile. When he entered the room, Eleanor barely recognized him. "Darling," he said, leaning in with dramatic concern. "You look awake." She stared at him. "It's been 5 years." He shrugged. "I grieved. You wouldn't want me to be miserable forever, would you? But you never came." Gregory offered a hollow chuckle. There wasn't much to say to someone in a coma. Elias, standing at the back of the room, felt his stomach twist, but he said nothing. Eleanor's eyes, though tired, sharpened like flint. "I wasn't gone. I was still here. And someone did talk to me." Gregory frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know who you are anymore," she said firmly. "But I know who Elias is. He saved me." The room went quiet. Gregory scoffed. "The doctor?" "The man who didn't walk away," Eleanor said, her voice now steady. "And that makes him more than a doctor. That makes him human." 2 weeks later, Eleanor left the hospital. Not in a Rolls-Royce, but in a modest car driven by Elias. She started over in a quieter town outside New York, away from tabloids and spotlights. With Elias's support, she launched a foundation dedicated to long-term coma care, hiring nurses, funding families, and offering hope to those who sat by still bedsides, just like Elias had once sat by Hayes. Their bond, born in silence and patience, slowly turned into something more. They fell in love, not in the whirlwind where the tabloids once documented, but in quiet breakfasts, shared laughter, and 1,000 small, unspoken understandings. Years later, at the grand opening of the Grace Morgan Urology Wing, Eleanor stood before a crowd, her voice steady. I lost everything when I went to sleep, but I woke up to something real. This place, this mission, and this man. Love doesn't always come with roses and riches. Sometimes it comes with whispered words, worn hands, and years of waiting. And in the front row, Elias smiled, because love, when built on kindness and unwavering belief, didn't need fanfare. It just needed time.